Hello, viewers. Welcome to our coronavirus outbreak conversation. Today, we will discuss on coronavirus pandemic as we are doing, and today we'll discuss its impact on our livelihood, economy, and international relations as well. Let's introduce our panel: Ambassador William B. Maidam, Senior Scholar of the Wilson Center, Washington, President of the Washington-based Right to Freedom, and former U.S. Ambassador in Bangladesh. And we are delighted to have Professor Dr. Ali Riaz, Distinguished Professor of the Illinois State University at Politics and Government, an eminent writer and political scientist. So how are you today, Ambassador Bill?
I am quite well, thank you, Mushfiq. As well as one can be when one is social distancing, that is sort of being isolated from everybody else. I rarely get out except to walk every day, and I couldn't even walk today because it was raining here. But I'm doing okay, I guess.
So you are not having hydroxychloroquine, by the way?
No, I haven't started that, and I don't plan to actually. What I believe about our president is one thing that he's not a doctor, and two, that he doesn't know what the heck he's doing. So anyway, let him go chomping away at that if he wants.
How are you, Professor Dr. Ali Riaz?
I'm doing okay as much as I could. I mean, given the circumstances. Being at home, yes, Bill, we were having some rain too for the last couple of days in central Illinois, and hence no walking outside. But it has been almost 3 months that I have been practically at home, barring few once in a while went out for just picking up the grocery. Most of the groceries are now delivered at home. Anyway, but otherwise, managing well. Let me put it this way.
Okay, let's start with Professor Dr. Ali Riaz. USA has 5% of world population, but more than 30% corona outbreak is here. Now the country deaths toll near 100,000. So what is your observation? Why is that?
It is already pretty much evident and proven that it is the failure of the leadership that has took us into this kind of situation. President Trump and his administration ignored all the warning signs, left us completely unprepared, and more importantly, that he didn't listen to the scientists. Science was ignored, preparation was absent, and in many instances, the support and the resources that were supposed to be dedicated to address this, the very beginning, wasn't done. So that is the federal level leadership crisis. We have also seen in many instances some of the states didn't do very well either. For example, New York should have been actually started its lockdown at least a week or two before when they started. That would have prevented at least 30,000 or so less number of deaths. So my primary argument should be that it is the failure of leadership, lack of resources, and most importantly, that the way it should have been coordinated, it hasn't been coordinated.
Okay. Ambassador Bill, President Donald Trump has argued it is a badge of honor that the USA has the world's highest number of confirmed COVID-19 infections. Do you agree with that? Are you feeling honor?
A badge of honor that we have the most infections?
Yeah.
I hadn't heard him say that, but that only makes me think even less well of him, which I didn't think very well of him before. So you haven't helped his standing with me, Mushfiq. The answer is it's worse than it's not a badge of honor. It's a badge of dishonor, actually. and the dishonor, as Ali says, it's basically on this government, on his own government, which fiddled around, which didn't take this thing seriously for at least 90 days. I'm sorry, well, from January through mid-March, about 45 days. And there's now a Columbia University study out which says had the government moved to social distancing, the same measures that it moved to in mid-March, had it moved a week earlier, it would have there would be 36,000. I think the number is 36,000 fewer deaths, and had it been 2 weeks, it would be 54,000 fewer deaths. So the fact that we didn't do anything in terms of social distancing for a long period of time, while he tried to make it appear as if it wasn't a very big, a very serious challenge and a very serious threat, is responsible for a whole lot of unnecessary deaths.
Now, he mentioned that because USA is testing more people than any other country of the world. That's why it's a badge of honor to having that much, infected people in a country.
Is that right? Oh, well, of course, he lied there, because we aren't testing more than any other country in the world. We've had, I don't know where we are on the testing list, but we haven't, in terms of our population, we haven't tested very many people at all, 4 or 5%, I think. Maybe I'm a little low, because we're getting better on testing all the time. But the governors of the states have basically run the show against the coronavirus, and it's to them that if we are testing well now, it's to their credit, none to his.
Yeah, Professor Ali Riaz, I need to mention that Professor Ali Riaz is a non-resident fellow of the Atlantic Council. And I want to ask you, you want to blame China for this pandemic? As the President Trump and State Department, they are blaming China that this virus started from China, from the lab, not from the market. So you want to blame the China for this?
No, I'm not blaming China. What I'm saying is that, and this has been my position from the get-go, that whether it has come from the lab is something that is a matter of investigation. So far, the scientists have confirmed that it has come from the wet market in Wuhan. Let's start with that one. Let us take until we get something else. I'm not going to speculate, because I'm neither in a position nor I'm going to encourage speculation or the conspiracy theory. Having said that, what happened is the first identification of this virus was early in December, 10th of December to be precise. It took 21 days for the Chinese authority to report it to WHO Beijing office, so losing 21 days. Those who have identified were muzzled and in some cases persecuted. I'm talking of the doctors in China. Then they have not provided enough information and was not transparent enough because of the system of lack of accountability. So here is my position, that had China been more transparent, had China been actually more effectively and promptly responded and provided information, it would have been easier for others to interject and possibly less number of deaths. And this is the responsibility China will have to bear. That is my position. And I think that should be investigated. Here I am, based on what is publicly available information, I'm suggesting this. Am I going to say the last word? I'm not going to say the last word. Let us investigate and see how lack of transparency, lack of accountability from the China's part have contributed to this pandemic spread, if not the origin. Definitely, it has come from somewhere, and that is a matter of more inquiry, because the scientist community need to understand how it started. Because if we really want to prevent another pandemic like this, shouldn't we know where it started, how it started, what actually contributed, how it spread? Those are my concerns. And here I'm completely different from Mr. Trump. I don't agree with Mr. Trump's position. that blaming and pointing finger is going to do, because what he is doing, he's trying to shift the blame to China because of his lack of effectiveness, his lack of actions. As Ambassador Milam has already noted, that at least 45 days he has practically undermined, underplayed this crisis, right? So now he doesn't want to take the responsibility.
You want to anything add, Ambassador Milam?
Well, I think that this whole thing about China is kind of a red herring, if you will. I'm sure that China did not act totally appropriately. China is not a very transparent country. It's an authoritarian country, a very rigorously authoritarian country. So there's no doubt that it probably covered up some of the outbreak of the coronavirus when it first broke out, as you would. But listen, how do we know? How can we say that things would have been any different? Would President Trump have taken the information that came out of China even earlier and would that have made any difference, or would he have just downplayed it as he did? I am not convinced that anything would have changed if China had been totally transparent. So I think it's a kind of political red herring. So that's my view. But I'm not trying to absolve China. I just think that in the case of the United States, at least, in the case of the United States, the president is fully responsible for those excess deaths that have occurred.
Let me echo Ambassador Milam. I am not suggesting that these things might have been different given the reluctance and to a great extent irresponsible behavior of the president and his administration. What I'm suggesting with respect to this China's responsibility is to the international community, the world. If the international community had a different, pieces of information, would they have acted differently? Maybe, maybe not, and that would be their responsibility, as it is in case of President Trump. It is his responsibility and his failure that has put us in this kind of situation.
Yes, I didn't mean to infer that, or imply, I should say, really, that you were not, that what you said about China was not accurate and didn't apply to the total world. I just to what happened in the United States, and I don't think Trump would have acted any differently had he known, or had the U.S. known weeks earlier about the outbreak.
Professor Ali Riaz, you were closely observing the Bangladesh situation, and Bangladeshi people, mostly our viewers, want to listen to you. So how you are observing the situation? Do you think Bangladesh current regime is on right track to tackle this pandemic, as we are every day we are learning from the spot that people are dying without having any treatment, and people are suffering for food, and the pro-government activists, they are stealing the relief materials, even the stimulus package. So what is your observation, and how can we survive, Bangladeshi people survive from this?
In case of Bangladesh, from the very beginning, pretty much akin to the US administration, the government has underplayed the whole thing. There was no preparedness. Government claimed there was preparedness. The government said that, this is not going to affect us, so on and so forth. So what we have seen from the very beginning of this crisis, with respect to the public health crisis, that the people were not tested. The number of tests was very small. Even now, it is very small compared to Bangladesh's 160 million people. I'm not suggesting everyone is going to be tested. Those who have the symptoms, at least needed to, that hasn't been done. And then the second thing is the entire public health infrastructure almost collapsed, because even those who are not infected, they are not getting the treatment for the simple thing, even if it is fever or something else, the routine, regular thing. They're not being treated because the healthcare facilities over the years, for a number of reasons, from you know lack of resource, that means not investment in the public health sector, to the corruption that we have seen. All these things have created a situation wherein there is no public health infrastructure that can withstand this kind of situation. Let alone even the regular situation is not good. So that being said, then there is this denial part that we have seen, that the counting is so low counting. If you look at the symptoms, there are more than 1,000 people have already died of those symptoms. If they have been tested, in many cases, even after their death, they have not been tested. And we don't know even the figure is the 1,000 is the correct number, because these are based on the press reports. There are many instances in Bangladesh, even in regular situation, it has not been reported. So if you add these symptoms with the official statistics, close to 400 plus, what do you see? It's about 1,500. It's not a small number. And the infection rate is going high. So this seems to be a completed disaster in terms of managing it. With respect to the economy, we have, and you have mentioned, Mushfiq, that there has been pilferage, there is stealing, theft of the relief materials, and then came the stimulus package, and it looks like that it is leaving the most vulnerable completely behind. Even when the last effort, first of all, the priority, if you look at the priority, the supporting this informal sector and those who are on the bottom of the society with very little resources, their stimulus package came at the last. This is very interesting because it tells us the priority. And then those are also being now reported that there has been misappropriation or attempted misappropriation. So all these things, from health sectors to economy, in terms of economy, there is this effort, but the stimulus packages are not reaching to the people that actually help the economy. And without the public health thing, and let me finally note with this one, that this lockdown, which is described as a general holiday in Bangladesh, has not been serious. Has not been serious at all. And the public awareness was less. Public came out on the streets, and then the decision of opening prematurely the garment sectors, the factories, the shopping malls, all are contributing to this spread of this pandemic, because community transmission has already taken place. Now, how do you actually address this without tending to not only testing, increasing testing, and also making sure that the health infrastructure is there?
Ambassador Mailam, how are you observing the situation of Bangladesh and the reason?
Well, first of all, I defer to Ali. He really knows a lot more about Bangladesh than I ever did or ever will. And what he says sounds quite accurate to me. So I don't have really anything to add. One could have expected this. I'm going to sort of move to a little different tack and say that I was interested in a thing that came from the New York Times this morning about Kerala, the state in southern India, which has about 35 million people, not anywhere near what Bangladesh, the population of Bangladesh or the United States. Kerala has 36 million people. It's quite poor, just like Bangladesh. And it saw the first outbreak of coronavirus there sometime in January, pretty much along the lines that everybody else did. Now, how many cases, how many infections do you think there are in Kerala after all this time, and how many deaths? You don't have to answer the question. I'll answer it for you. There's been about 700 cases, 36 million people, and four deaths in Kerala. What's the difference? Why is Kerala so different than Bangladesh? Part of the reason is because there's a government system there that works together so that the bureaucracy works with whatever party's in charge. It is not a zero-sum game. And as at least I've always said, Bangladesh politics have always been, and seem like they always will be, a zero-sum game. So nobody ever thinks about the national good as sort of at the beginning of things. They think about, what's this mean for me and my party? So I think that there's, so my lesson is that part of the problem here is just the political and economic systems that most of the South Asian countries have, and the same is true for the United States, which is also a zero-sum game political system. So that's what I'll say when you've given me this opening.
Yeah. Professor Ali Riaz, government is on zero tolerance on freedom of expression. Attack on free speech is not stopped by the ruling authority. Rather, it is more enhanced in this pandemic time even. So, what is your observation? Why they are so attacking on free speech? What's the problem with that?
I describe this as a pandemic of persecution. Bangladesh is facing two pandemics at the same time.
A good line.
One is, of course, the pandemic, the public health crisis. Another is this pandemic persecution. You've seen since the beginning of this crisis, what the government has done has tried to muzzle anyone who is speaking out, and particularly in social media. The journalists are already under immense pressure in Bangladesh. Many editors have acknowledged that they exercise self-censorship. Reporters do over the last years. And if you look at the Reporters Without Borders ranking, you'll see that over the last 2 years, 2018 and 19, Bangladesh has dropped 5 notch in 2 years. So it is not new that it started during the pandemic. The pandemic has provided an excuse. Now the point is why the government is doing it. One thing is that they have already have the tool at their disposal. That is called Digital Security Act, which they've been using it. They've been using it before. Now they have practically what you described as an enhanced mode. I think for two reasons that we have seen this enhancement. Within the context of already deteriorating press freedom and freedom of expression. One thing is government over the years propagated and this narrative that Bangladesh is doing extremely well in terms of its economy, stellar record, both GDP and all sorts. What the pandemic has shown that how fragile or practically how hollow that claim is. If it had 8% growth rate for almost 5 or 10 years, what happened? Why these people are so much in this dire situation that we are seeing? The most vulnerable people, the poverty that we are seeing suddenly within weeks of this situation. So there is a disparity that was created, which they didn't talk about. Now it doesn't have to be theoretically explained to you. It is on your face. You can actually see them on the street of Bangladesh, right? So that's number one, that this hollowness of the basic ideological foundation which provided the legitimacy to this government for the last 10 years and have been advanced that it is going to fall apart because people can see it. That's number one. The second thing is, if you notice, that there has been more intense scrutiny in social media. Why? Because the mainstream media is already domesticated. They have a very little space to talk about. Now that if they allow the social media, and we have seen previously that social media had engendered various kinds of movements, social movements. Road safety movement in 2018, August, or for that matter, the entire quota reform movement. And there are also, this has become the major source of communication and information, even when it is not creating a social movement. So these two things in the background of this deteriorating freedom of expression situation that we are witnessing, what I am describing as pandemic of persecution.
let me ask one thing. As we are always feel to say, comfortably we say we have a very vibrant civil society. So where are they? Because the civil society, those who are representing, they very few people are talking about these irregularities or even the autocratic regime or rules. So why they are not talking about? What's the main reason?
That question to me or Ali?
Yeah, you will respond accordingly after Ali.
Oh, let me very briefly. I'll wait to hear from Ambassador Milam, but very briefly, the entire entire situation that we have seen over the last years, that the civil society has been weakened, constrained, you can say decimated to a great extent for various reasons. So the vibrant civil society that you are talking about, Mushfiq, was a matter of past. Over the past 5 years, I think it has become weakened to that extent that there's very few feeble voices left. As a society, I'm not sure whether there is a robust civil society that can raise their voice.
Yes, please, Ambassador Milam, if you can words.
Well, I mean, yes, I was going to start off pretty much the same way because I agree with Ali, but I would have put it a bit differently. I've been writing about this off and on for a long time. Not recently, I must admit, because I've given up on things ever changing. But I've likened it to George Orwell's 1984. I think there has become over time, because of the growing authoritarian power of the government, the growing surveillance, the growing ability to hear and know what people are saying to each other and thinking, maybe even, there's a pervasive fear that is overriding what used to be and I think pushing against what used to be a fairly robust civil society, to the point where it is no longer robust and people are afraid to stick their heads up and say anything. And I mean, with a very few exceptions, and those are the exceptions I can think of have enough international prestige so that harming them, taking them would bring down a lot of international pressure. But for most of the would-be critics in Bangladesh who don't really like what's going on, they're frightened out of their minds to even speak up, because the next day they're going to disappear. Some of their family is going to be disappeared, something like that. So I think it's a pervasive feeling of fear that is probably going to persist until the regime itself falls or somehow changes, which I don't see happening in the present circumstances.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ali Riaz and Ambassador William B. Milam. It's a wonderful conversation, and obviously we'll keep continuing this type of conversation. Hope to see you next anytime. See you soon.
Thank you, Mushfiq.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.